much, Anthony. That's thank you for the introduction. That's great. Well, hello everyone at the other end of the computer screen. So yes, as Anthony said, we've got a series of 4 webinars. I'm going to do the first 2, and Caroline Crowe, who is into coaching. Caroline's also a vet and is doing a master's in coaching. And so what I'm going to start with is quite theoretical today, but it's just to perhaps expand your horizons, if you like, on how you think about psychology. Everyone I meet seems fascinated with psychology. I certainly was. And it's just to try and give you a little bit of breadth on some aspects. And one of the things, the reason why these webinars came around, or this little series came around, was, I mean, I speak at various conferences, and I suppose people get to know me, and they often email me questions about motivation, confidence, well-being, happiness. Not that they're depressed or anything like that. That's really not my bag. I'm not a clinical psychologist, but it's just people sort of maybe looking for a wee bit of direction. And I thought, well, let's put on something to help a go-to place for questions like I'm receiving. So, and one of the striking features of this is, I mean, obviously our profession, very highly qualified people to get into it and very intelligent people within it. And one of the things that never fails to amaze me and strikes me again and again is actually, how is it that very well educated and intelligent, whatever that means, people actually sometimes lose their way? And it seems to be even sometimes that actually they seem to be even more prone to getting lost than other people who we may look upon, and I don't mean any looking down upon way, as you kind of think maybe aren't as educated or as intelligent. What's going on there? And I want to just look at some of the psychologies that's going on and maybe some of the definitions. So let's start. I mean, first of all, this concept of intelligence has been debated by philosophers and even psychologists more recently for years, for millennia. Now, is there a consensus about what intelligence is across the board? There's still not, but there's different ways of looking upon it. And of course, traditionally, or maybe more recently, we've always sort of thought as intelligence equals your IQ score. Alfred Binet, back in 1920, invented the concept of IQ, and it was for measuring kids in school in relation to their academic performance. So there's this assumption that, well, okay, if you're intelligent, you crack out a big IQ score, and that's it, right? Isn't it? Some people are just born lucky. They've got the right stuff. They were born with the right brains, and that's it, full stop. And I think what I want to do during this webinar is perhaps broaden that notion of intelligence, and even especially next week is challenge that assumption that you're just born lucky, and actually how various notions of intelligence are better or worse at predicting how people cope when things maybe just don't go quite to plan. Okay? So one of the things I want to point out is, how do we respond to adversity and challenge? Just as a little aside, and then I'll come back to the intelligence in a moment. How do we respond when things go wrong? One of the things actually, if you think about it, is telling stories about how well everything went is actually not very predictive at all of how you're going to cope when things don't go well in the future. So in other words, when we, as we have this classic tendency to do in interviews and CVs, of course, we tell about all our successes. And actually, they're really pretty poor at predicting how people are going to cope when the proverbial sort of hits the fan and when we're actually end up getting into a stress situation. So there's 2 responses to adversity and failure. In other words, when things get tough. The first one is defined as the helpless response, and the second is the more resilient response. And they're characterized by various P's here I put together for you. So in the helpless response, performance plummets. What you were able to do possibly quite easily or quite confidently previously is now plummeting. You don't seem to be able to do what you were able to do even 5-10 minutes ago or yesterday. The belief in what sort of outcome would be, good or bad. So the helpless response is marked by pessimism, worrying about the belief in a bad outcome. The assumption is this is inevitably going to end badly. And in the helpless response, who do we blame? Well, we blame people. And that can be ourselves, or that can be other people. But we tend to blame, it's your fault you made me do it, it's your fault you didn't help me, you didn't hold the dog right, whatever it might be. Or it's my fault, I'm useless, I'm no good, I can never do this, I'm just pathetic. And persistence in relation to the event in the helpless response is poor. In other words, we give up. We kind of think, what's the point? I can't do this, let's leave. Often when you ask people when they're experiencing the helpless response, and this is part of the reason sometimes why it happens, and we'll look at this more next week, is one of the things they were wanting to do was look good in the eyes of other people, and this real tendency to look perfect. The assumption is that any flaw equals a weakness, and therefore